Things were really popping off over at Annie Guthrie's place yesterday evening. For those keeping tabs on my social media, I was uploading a bunch of updates to TikTok and YouTube since I stayed out there so late. We essentially received information that a trio of local deputies had arrived at the residence belonging to Annie Guthrie. Initially, I was unsure if they were federal agents or local law enforcement, but I confirmed they were deputies after spotting the official insignia on their vehicles as they left. Those 3 officers remained on the property for about 3 hours total, based on the head count I was able to make from outside. Upon arriving, they went inside carrying several pieces of gear, and shortly after, we could clearly see bright light bursts coming from within the house. It was obvious they were taking forensic photos inside the home. At first, the flashes were concentrated primarily around the garage area of the property. Watching through the glass, I could see them navigating the entire layout. They were systematically moving from room to room, snapping photographs in various sections of the interior. After a 3-hour stay, the group emerged wearing blue medical gloves. They hopped into their patrol cars without uttering a single word and then proceeded to drive away very slowly. The timing here is quite provocative, occurring just after Savannah Guthrie released her video message, where she indicated a willingness to offer some form of financial compensation. You have probably watched the clip already, but I transcribed her statement precisely. "We heard your message and we understand. We are now pleading for you to return our mother so we can celebrate together. This represents our only path toward finding peace. This situation is incredibly significant to us, and we will pay." There are facts about Savannah Guthrie you must understand before this footage makes sense. She is a professional communicator and law school graduate who has anchored major broadcasts through elections, court decisions, and international emergencies without ever showing a crack in her calm demeanor. Since her mother went missing, she has been mostly silent. This isn't for lack of things to say, but because she cannot speak on her suspicions until the authorities make the first move. This video reveals what she truly knows. When her mother vanished on January 31st, 2026, the public witnessed a famous journalist transform into a grieving daughter in an instant. She left her top morning news show and even skipped the 2026 Winter Olympics held in Milan. She turned to Instagram to post personal pleas instead of reading scripts in a studio. She was seen weeping while clutching her 4 siblings' hands, begging the kidnapper to release their mother. She told her mother that everyone was searching for her and that the family wouldn't quit. The world saw a version of Savannah, defined by her profound sorrow and desperation. People watched her leave yellow blossoms at a mailbox for an 84-year-old woman's memorial service. However, the public never saw the side of Savannah. She keeps behind closed doors. No official statement or social media post has showcased the private version of her, the version that earned a degree from the prestigious Harvard Law School. Family friends described her during the early weeks of the probe not as someone paralyzed by fear or sadness, but as someone who was absolutely livid regarding the investigation's direction. Her frustration wasn't general. It was aimed at a very specific narrative being pushed about one particular individual involved in the case. Identifying who she is quietly protecting and who she isn't is the fundamental secret that explains each of the 7 details we are about to examine. Expert investigators know that when someone is taken from within a family's own social circle, those closest to the victim almost always have more information than they admit. It isn't necessarily about hiding a crime. It's the psychological weight of knowing something terrible that might involve a loved one, which doesn't come out like a prepared statement. That knowledge manifests through body language, strategic silences, and the way you might favor one person at a funeral while keeping a very careful distance from another. Savannah has been communicating through those subtle methods for 7 weeks now, and this footage serves as a translation for detail number 1. On the night of January 31st, 2026, 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, who had heart issues and limited mobility, took an Uber to Annie's home in Tucson, Arizona. She pulled up around 5:32 in the evening for a standard Saturday dinner and game night. It was the sort of routine that usually grounds a family's week. Annie Guthrie is the oldest of the 3 siblings. Savannah is the middle daughter, and Cameron is the youngest child in the family. This sibling dynamic is important here, not because age indicates guilt, but because it determines who had the most regular access to the victim. Annie is the one living in Tucson, the child whose house Nancy frequented, and the one whose kitchen table Nancy sat at on her final night of freedom. Annie knew her mother was arriving, knew the departure time, and knew that Nancy would eventually be alone in a house 4 miles away, with a serious heart condition and no help. That very specific and complete knowledge of Nancy's schedule and her moments of vulnerability is the actual foundation upon which this entire kidnapping was orchestrated. This wasn't a guess or something observed from afar. It was known information. Consequently, the local law enforcement agencies treated the investigation exactly that way. From the very start of the probe, the detectives didn't just walk through Annie's neighborhood once and call it a day before moving on to other leads. They returned on multiple occasions, making several follow-up visits to the same street and the same houses, asking neighbors about that exact window of time repeatedly. Jennifer Coffindaffer, a former FBI agent, pointed out publicly that she found the fact that the area had been searched twice to be quite concerning. A standard search shouldn't require a second pass unless the first one yielded something that needed investigation or if new data kept pointing back to that spot. They didn't keep coming back because they were out of options. They returned because the physical evidence kept drawing them back to that specific residential location. Police departments working with limited resources do not spend time revisiting the same neighborhood over and over without a specific piece of evidence driving that decision. They don't commit the staff, the time, or the interagency resources for repeat searches on a single block unless a lead keeps drawing them back there. Every visit was linked to a specific tip that led them back to that address. Savannah understands that implication perfectly, given her background in law school. She recognizes the significance of federal agents returning to a single home with the same line of questioning on several different dates. She understands the logic. She is aware that investigators don't keep circling the same block by sheer luck. Yet, she has chosen to say nothing about it to the public. Not a single word has been spoken about the constant police presence on her sister's street or what they found. That silence is our first detail. For those following our coverage since day one who want the full backstory on Tomaso Chion's early links to this probe, click the video currently displayed. Check it out in tandem with this report, as that footage provides the foundation for our current discussion. Moving on to item 2. A pivotal mystery has loomed over this investigation from the start, yet major news outlets have largely ignored it. After they finished eating at Annie's place on January 31st, once the games concluded and Nancy needed to leave, why did her daughter fail to give her a lift? Annie was right there in her own residence. The trip is only 4 miles. Plus, Nancy is 84 and deals with major cardiac issues. Typically, you would expect the oldest child to chauffeur their aging parent home. That simply failed to occur. Instead, Tomaso took the wheel. It was Tomaso Chion, the son-in-law, who helped Nancy into his vehicle, made the short drive, parked in her garage, and escorted her indoors. At 9:48 p.m., the garage door rose, shutting again 2 minutes later. This marks the final verified sighting of Nancy Guthrie by anyone besides her immediate relatives. One could easily find harmless reasons for this setup. Maybe Tomaso volunteered while Annie rested. It might have just been more convenient. While those theories might hold water, detectives are trained to look beyond simple excuses and analyze the underlying logistics. The real issue is the motive behind the logistics. Why ensure Tomaso was the final person with Nancy instead of Annie? This shifts the timeline of interaction exclusively to him. The son-in-law, rather than the daughter, becomes the witness to her arrival, the driver of the path, and the observer of her final moments alone. Should anyone in that home have known about the events coming 4 hours later, the choice of driver becomes a massive tactical move. It looks like a calculated maneuver to place Tomaso at the scene while distancing Annie. Now for point 3, a fact that looks more suspicious by the day. Early in February 2026, reporter Ashley Banfield used police leaks to reveal that a car linked to the Guthrie home, specifically a vehicle tied to Tomaso Chion, was impounded and processed for forensic clues. Pima County authorities eventually released a memo exonerating the Guthrie relatives, yet they kept the vehicle in custody regardless. By mid-March 2026, over 6 weeks since the disappearance, that car remains in police hands. A retired tactical lead questioned this delay since the family was supposedly cleared. Officials were clear. They are victims, not targets of the probe. Why then is their property still missing? Sheriff Nanos provided a clue during a People magazine sit-down. He detailed the extensive search of their belongings, noting they conducted interviews, seized electronics, and forensically swept their cars and houses, reiterating their victim status. When gear and homes are processed, it involves deep digital recovery, location tracking, and biological sweeps to pinpoint exactly where anyone was at any given moment. The fact that the car remains impounded 6 weeks later suggests more than just paperwork issues. If a vehicle from an exonerated family is held for over a month for testing, it implies they found a lead that remains critical to the case. Giving back electronics usually signals that the data dump is finished and the cops have what they require. Holding a car for 6 weeks suggests the exact opposite. There is likely something inside that vehicle that the police aren't done with yet. A piece of evidence in there is still active and far too vital to release. Moving to our fourth point. 3 days after the missing persons report, on February 4th, 2026, TMZ filmed authorities swarming the couple's Tucson residence. One specific officer seen on the property wore a vest displaying the letters ICAC. That acronym represents the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, an elite federal unit. These specialists deal with high-level digital crimes, cracking encryptions and pulling secret data from devices that people think are wiped clean. The officer was spotted holding a UFED, a sophisticated tool used for deep forensic data recovery. Police use this hardware to breach locked phones or tablets, bypassing security to recover messages that were supposedly deleted. It unearths files long thought lost. You only bring that gear to a crime scene if you are hunting for something specific on a particular device. Local sheriffs were vague, claiming a uniform patch does not necessarily define the crime. Crucially, they never denied the unit's presence. While they downplayed the gear, former intelligence officer Tracy Walder suggested a different possibility for why they were there. These digital experts are masters at tracing ransom notes sent via burner accounts or tracking crypto transfers through hidden networks. While that explains a ransom, it doesn't account for the extraction tool. That device is for physically cracking a phone already in hand. Someone there had a target device. That hardware held crucial info, so they brought the perfect lockpick to get it. We still don't know what they found. A month and a half later, everything is still under wraps and the car is still gone. Savannah is aware of that device. She knows about the vehicle too, yet stays silent. To grasp the money trail and what the ransom specifics reveal about the mastermind, click the linked video. Fact 5. On March 2nd, 2026, exactly 1 month after the report, Savannah Guthrie returned to the Tucson Memorial at her mother's house. Surrounded by tributes and flowers, she wasn't solo. She arrived with her sister and brother-in-law, Annie and Tomaso. The trio stood there together, and that footage speaks volumes in a way that official statements cannot. Legal expert Nancy Grace analyzed those clips during a summit in Austin, leveraging her years of experience with families under pressure. After seeing Savannah embrace Tomaso, Grace concluded that the daughter clearly doesn't view him as a suspect in her mother's case. Nancy Grace makes a solid point with her analysis. Savannah really leaned into Tomaso and held him tight. Knowing every eye was on her, she let that affection show. Nancy Grace finished by saying Savannah isn't suspicious of Tomaso at all. Yet, there's one thing Nancy Grace left out. If Savannah isn't pointing the finger at him, then who exactly is she looking at? Pay attention to who she avoids hugging just as much as who she embraces. Look closely at how those three people are positioned together. Notice her distance from the sister whose vehicle is being held, whose house is a magnet for feds, and where Nancy Guthrie was last seen eating dinner. Both sisters stood there after 31 days of mourning at the memorial. However, the gap between them tells a story of two very different types of pain. Their body language doesn't scream shared innocence or mutual healing. It looks like Savannah is comforting one person while carefully handling the other. As a Harvard Law alum, she is a pro at managing public perception and knew exactly what those cameras were capturing. That choice was entirely intentional. Not a single move she's made since February 1st was a fluke. Every action has been part of a very specific plan. Each statement and public citing is the work of a seasoned expert following the strict advice of lawyers and police investigators. That memorial wasn't some candid moment caught on tape. It was a staged event. Savannah set the stage knowing full well what people would see. If you are following this and want Nancy back safe, type the word "found" in the comment section right now. Your engagement helps share this case with a wider audience. Now for detail number 6. The guy in the mask on Nancy Guthrie's camera wasn't just winging it. He didn't seem to be guessing his way through the house. Every pro looking at this case agrees on one thing. This was a calculated, professional hit that required inside information to pull off successfully. Former agent Brianna Fox noted that the guy walked up to the door with the confidence of someone who actually lived there. Andrew McCabe, once a top FBI official, pointed out that the suspect didn't look nervous or sneaky at all. He wasn't acting like a criminal. He moved like someone who had already weighed the risks. He was fully aware the camera was recording him. He messed with it, tried to break it, and when that didn't work, he just used some leaves from a plant to block the view. Even without tools, he figured it out because he knew what to expect. He also knew Nancy was solo that night. He wasn't worried about pets or house guests. He was laser-focused on his target, certain that nobody else would be standing in his way. He was aware of the pacemaker. Leaving her tech and heart meds behind wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated move. Whoever did this knew the device tracked her vitals and that without her medicine, her time was essentially running out. The tracking stopped at 2:28 in the morning. That was the plan. He knew her schedule inside and out. He knew Saturdays were for trips and family meals, which is a massive clue. This leads us to a major break in the investigation. The feds are now zeroing in on January 11th and January 24th as key dates for the timeline. People in the neighborhood told reporters that investigators were hunting for surveillance video from those two specific Saturdays. One was 8 days prior to the kidnapping and the other was 3 weeks earlier. Both were Saturdays, just like the family dinners. A stalker was tracking their weekend habits, details that only someone close to the family circle would ever really be aware of. Her weekend routine and trips to Annie's place weren't posted online. You couldn't just find that information in a news story or on Facebook. This was private family business. The last place that schedule was likely discussed or confirmed was right there at Annie Guthrie's dining table. All signs point back to that specific residence. Every piece of the puzzle ends there. Now, let's look at February 7th, 2026. A week after the disappearance, Savannah sat with her siblings to record a video. She started with a line that has largely been ignored by the media. She said 8 simple words. "We received your message and we understand. Coming from a Harvard-trained lawyer, that is significant." An ex-CIA officer noted that Savannah's performance was strictly scripted and likely vetted by police and legal experts before she spoke. Those 8 words were carefully picked by experts during a high-stakes moment. She specifically said they got the message. This wasn't about news reports. She was confirming that a direct piece of information had reached them, and they were acknowledging it publicly. Only 3 days prior, Andrew McCabe felt the family was just desperately trying to reach out to kidnappers who hadn't contacted them yet. Back on February 4th, his take was that no real contact had been made between the family and the people holding their mother. But by day 7, everything changed. A new note had surfaced at a Tucson TV station that very same day. The news director said this letter had secret details to prove it was real. It was nothing like the first note, and asked for no cash. It was meant to prove they were legit. Savannah's use of the word understand over hope suggests she truly grasped the situation's complexity. Once you have the background, the message makes sense in a way a typical ransom note wouldn't. Just look at the 3 of them. Savannah was precise, like a lawyer reading a final draft. Cameron looked absolutely drained. But keep your eyes on Annie during this part. When those words are spoken, look at Annie's reaction. Does she look surprised, or does she look like she has heard this all before? Experts look for disconnects between what people say and how their bodies react. In that video, all 3 siblings are tied to one statement. That news doesn't land the same way for all 3 of them. Savannah is already clued into the text's contents. Cameron is still processing the weight of the words. Meanwhile, Annie is dealing with a burden that is entirely different. 7 confirmed facts all point toward one conclusion, acting less like random claims and more like a consistent trend. It is a trend that avoids looking at some random stranger. The evidence loops back every time to a Tucson dining room, where an 84-year-old woman spent her final night among her relatives. Here is how criminal trends work in the real world. You can usually find a reason to dismiss a single odd detail. Maybe a car held in evidence is just a paperwork delay. A federal agent at the door could be routine. A shirt might just be a shirt. Police patrolling a neighborhood is standard. A daughter not giving her mother a ride might just be a minor choice. That could just be how the night concluded. On its own, every single detail has a perfectly harmless explanation. But when 7 harmless things all lead to one house, they create a profile of a woman hiding something with the poise of a trained lawyer and journalist. That stops being a string of flukes and starts being a roadmap. Cases are built on those foundations. Subscribe now and hit that alert bell. We are dropping new updates as this story breaks. Our next video dives into the Bureau's January surveillance logs. Let us focus on the masked intruder. The hunt for what Savannah knows hinges on a question of identity. Not who thought of the crime, but who actually carried it out. The solution keeps leading back to the social circles surrounding the house we are watching. Here is the official profile from federal agents. A male, roughly 5'9" or 5'10", medium build, wearing a face cover, dark coat and mittens, carrying a black Walmart brand 25-liter backpack. Detectives tracked that bag through the store. He also had a pistol in an ill-fitting holster. Former agent Steve Moore noted the gear was totally mismatched. He had a tiny concealable handgun stuffed into a large pouch, designed for a heavy-duty revolver. Former detective Dale Lundberg called that specific gear choice one of the strangest things he saw in his whole career. He argued that dedicated shooters and police are usually the only ones who actually use holsters. This was not a street thug. It was someone whose gear was part of his personal image. Look at that profile within Annie and Tomaso's world. Tomaso is the lead singer for a Tucson rock group called Early Black. His drummer is Dominic Evans, a fit elementary teacher with a beard who lived in the same city and worked closely with the man who drove Nancy home. After the feds released the porch video, people online said Evans looked just like the guy. He soon told the papers he spent 40 minutes talking to police. He claimed he was with his kids the night Nancy went missing. He felt like someone was trying to steal his identity. He has not been charged with anything, but agents grilled him because he fit the physical description perfectly. That man is tied to Tomaso through music and location, and Tomaso's wife hosted the final meal Nancy ever ate. If Savannah thinks Tomaso is clean, and her actions at the funeral suggest she does, then his guilt is no longer the main question. The real question is whether someone in his inner circle had the data needed for this hit. Did someone in their house gather intelligence? Could a friend or bandmate have picked up enough details about Nancy's life to map out the entire crime? That is a very pointed question that federal agents are investigating from the center of the circle outward. They are not looking at random people. They are checking who in the family network knew exactly what that intruder clearly knew. The solution isn't in some government database. It is tucked away in a specific neighborhood in a specific city. That world keeps overlapping with the local music scene and the home of Annie and Tomaso. That intruder did not come from nowhere. He knew things that only people close to the family would have known. The trail keeps heading back to the same block, the same house, and the same group of friends. It is not that detectives have no other options. It is that every single lead they follow brings them right back there. Let us look at what the case has uncovered since February 1st. They found biological evidence inside Nancy's house. It does not match Nancy or her close friends. A search through the 19 million profiles in the national database found nothing. The person who left it has never been arrested for a felony or entered into the system. Agents are now using family history sites to track the DNA, the same way they caught the Golden State Killer. They find relatives and work back to the source. No criminal record is needed for this. The search is happening now. Once it finds a match, when they narrow it down from millions to just one person, the case moves from finding a name to making it stick in court. Think about what that missing DNA match reveals about this person's history. No hit in the system means this guy has never been processed by the law in a way that required a swab. The person who left evidence in Nancy's house during a calculated professional hit does not have the history of a typical criminal. They have the clean record of a person who has never been caught. They likely look normal, hold a job, and have a regular life. This is exactly why a former federal agent mentioned that this mystery only breaks when a close contact talks, like a relative or a partner, someone choosing a $1.2 million payout, or their own conscience over their ties to the suspect. Beyond the family tree research, there is the digital data pulled from the family residence, along with tracking info from the impounded SUV and thousands of hours of video footage scrutinized second by second by the Bureau's tech experts in Quantico, a process the FBI labels as the heart of their building case, including the bag linked to Walmart and those 2 specific Saturdays in January where a watcher likely studied their routine to set a trap. By late February, the primary command center shifted from Tucson up to Phoenix. This move highlights the current focus of the operation. It is no longer about searching the brush, but rather high-level data analysis, computer forensics, and preparing a trial-ready file. This isn't backing down. It's the moment the puzzle pieces finally start coming together. For 7 weeks now, Savannah Guthrie has carried a heavy, private burden of understanding. A very personal kind of insight, a perspective shaped by her legal and media background, realizing that the individual who snatched her mother was no random drifter who just happened to be there. Insiders say she is fuming rather than just mourning, specifically about the focus on Tomaso, because she feels the narrative is skewed, not because he is irrelevant, but because the public has the whole story wrong. On February 15th, she released a clip saying, "You are not alone, and it is never too late to do what is right." That phrasing is intentional. You do not tell a total stranger that they are not lost or alone. You say those things to a person whose headspace you actually recognize. Someone whose loneliness you can picture because you have a clear idea of their identity and what pushed them to this edge. The phrase, "do the right thing," is not a shout into the void. It is a direct signal to a human being you think still has a shred of decency. Consider the grit it takes to say those words and truly mean them. To look straight into a lens and promise the person who kidnapped your mom that they are redeemable, that statement only holds weight if you assume the listener is still capable of feeling guilt. You have to believe there is a spark of humanity left in them to even try. You do not talk to a stranger that way. A random predator triggers nothing but terror and a demand for justice. Instead, Savannah reached out to their shared sense of being human. She gave them a chance to surrender. And you only provide an exit strategy when you can see the path they took well enough to know they can still turn back. Savannah chose those specific lines because she thinks they will resonate with a specific individual. Someone connected to a life she remembers, a world she once shared at a Saturday night dinner in Tucson. And at the funeral service, she comforted her brother-in-law with the genuine kindness of a woman who has already decided he is not the one to blame for her mother's disappearance, implying her suspicions lie elsewhere with a truth the world is not yet ready to hear. 7 confirmed facts, all leading to the same conclusion. A sequence that points inward, not away toward some ghost. A trail that leads right back to that dinner table where an 84-year-old woman spent her final night with her loved ones. The labs are processing the DNA, the family history is being mapped, the phone records are decrypted, the vehicle is being stripped for evidence and kept. And in that space between Savannah's private hunches and what the law can prove, the truth is surfacing. What happened to Nancy Guthrie? She is 84. Her heart device stopped recording at 2:28 in the morning. She left her vital meds behind. She cannot walk 50 yards without help. She would not last in some makeshift shelter without someone looking after her. Still, there is no proof of her passing, no remains, and no forensic data that rules out her being alive right now, held by someone waiting for their payoff. Sheriff Nanos continues to treat this as a rescue. He recently told the media that his team is absolutely gaining ground. His initial instincts have not wavered one bit. Despite 7 weeks without a formal charge or a named person of interest, he claims they are closer. Think about how much that word implies. In a high-profile case being watched by every network in the country, a sheriff claiming his team is definitely closer is a massive gamble if he is wrong. He used that word on purpose. That is not the talk of a man losing hope. That is a man holding on to secrets that are not ready for a press release. The border with Mexico is only about 60 miles south of the city. Federal agents and Mexican authorities were in the loop from the start. That is standard for the region. But it also shows the feds have not dismissed the idea that Nancy was moved across the line. The search and detention in Rio Rico, 60 miles south of town on the night that doorbell clip went public, aligns with that theory. That person was eventually let go, but the possibility of a cross-border transport is still on the table. If Nancy Guthrie is still with us, and the way the police are acting suggests they think so, she is being held by someone waiting for the perfect time to make a move. They are tracking the news, watching the tips roll in, and seeing the bounty hit $1.2 million. But they might not realize that the DNA work is ongoing, the phone data is cracked, and the car is still in the shop for testing. The net is tightening. The gap between a hunch and a conviction is shrinking, and the window to do the right thing, as Savannah mentioned, is still open for now. But that door will not stay open forever. If you have any leads, if you saw anything strange in the foothills back in January or February, Or, if someone you know started acting odd around the 1st of February, please call 1-800, call FBI, or go to tips.fbi.gov. The phones are active, the cash is ready, and the family is still hoping for a miracle. Nancy Ellen Guthrie was born January 27, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She lost her husband in 1988 when her kids were young but stayed strong. She raised 3 kids in Tucson. She built a life centered on her faith and her family routines, church on Sundays, dinners on Saturdays, and taking an Uber to her daughters so she would not be an inconvenience. She went inside, the garage shut at 9:50 p.m., and then someone who knew her every move snatched her away from the life she spent 84 years creating. She deserves answers to every question raised here. She deserves the effort put into every detail we have shared. She deserves to be brought home, and whoever is keeping her needs to realize they cannot carry this secret for the rest of their lives. If this video helped you see the case differently, please send it to someone else. Just one share could reach the person holding the missing piece of the puzzle. Hit the subscribe button and the bell icon. Our next video will dive deep into the FBI surveillance timeline. Analyzing January 11th and January 24th clarifies the origins of this scheme, those tracking it, and the future steps for this probe. This matter remains active. We are not backing down. The Chronicle of Nancy Guthrie hasn't. This case reminds us of a powerful and uncomfortable truth. Danger does not always come from strangers. It often hides within familiar spaces, routines, and relationships we trust the most. The disappearance of Nancy Guthrie is not just a mystery. It is a reflection of how easily ordinary moments can turn into irreversible tragedies when vigilance fades. There is a deeper lesson here about awareness and responsibility. Every detail matters. Small decisions, overlooked patterns, and unspoken concerns can become critical pieces of a much larger puzzle. It also highlights the emotional burden carried by those closest to the truth, where silence, fear, and loyalty can blur the line between protection and accountability. At the same time, this story is a call for compassion and courage. Justice is not only built by investigators, but by ordinary people who choose to speak up, even when it's difficult. The willingness to act, to report, and to care can make the difference between a case going cold and a life being saved. Ultimately, this is a reminder to value the people we love, to question what feels off, and to never ignore the quiet signals that something isn't right, because sometimes the truth is closer and more human than we want to believe.